All right, welcome to Christian Overcomers, and thank you for joining us for this Bible study. Hey, guess what? We got an exciting study here today. We're going to talk about day 5, dragons and sea monsters. You know, a lot of people don't realize that these things are mentioned in the Bible. Dinosaurs even, and dragons and sea monsters and things like that. And we're gonna show that. But I want to first show you something very interesting about the days of creation. All right, in the creation week, we had here in day 1, we had the light was created. Day 2, you had the waters above and were separated from above and below, and the sky was made, or the firmament. Day 3, we had land and vegetation. Day 4, the sun and the moon and the stars were created. Day 5 that we're at today in this study, we're going to be talking about the sea life and the birds that were created. And day 6, the animals and man. But there's something very important I want you to see. There is a pattern here within the creation week itself. And it's always fun to find these sorts of nuggets of truth because, one truth always leads to another truth. And I want to show you this. This is really cool. You can actually see a correlation here between day 1 and day 4. I got it color-coded, and there's a line going in between them. On day 1, light was made, but then and then on day 4, the sun and the moon and the stars were made. These both gave light upon the earth. Day 2, the oceans were separated from the waters that were above, and the sky was created. And here we see sea life mentioned, and birds. So life in the skies as well as life in the oceans. There's a direct correlation between day 2 and day 5. Day 3, we see correlates with day 6. The land and vegetation were created on day 3, and then they were later on filled with animals and man. So, what's fascinating about this is you can actually break this apart, this creation week, into two segments, or you can break it into half. The first half being what I call preparation days, and the second half being fulfillment days. So basically what you see here is light was created on day 1, but that was just the very basic foundation of what we see in the skies or in the heavens. But on day 4, God continues, he completes his work in the heavens with the light with the light givers that give light upon the earth by making the sun and the moon and the stars. Now on day 2, God made the oceans and the sky, but there was no life in them. But then on day 5, God filled them with life. And then day 3 here, God prepared the land for man, who would later be created on day 6. So you can kind of see that in God's working schedule here. In the beginning of the week, he kind of laid the foundation for things. And then at the end of the week, he completed his things. And so, we could even probably, if we have big projects or businesses, they could probably run like this and copy God's production week, his week of production. Fascinating. Just wanted to share that little tidbit with you. Those kinds of things are very fun to find. And you will see that they pay off in the long run. You might say, well, that's just interesting. It's just a fun fact. But you'll find out that fun facts actually add up later on. They oftentimes will fill in the missing pieces to other hard to figure out topics. And so that's why I like to bring those up. It's fascinating to dwell upon and to think about God's word and to be able to recognize his patterns and how he does things. All right, let's move on to the first verse of this 5th day of creation. And God said, Genesis 1:20, and God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. Okay, the open firmament of heaven would be that empty area called the sky at that time. So the moving creature that hath life. This is the first. The animals that were created in the sea, as well as the birds, they were the first living creatures that God had created. The first things that had life. On day 3, we had plant life, but they didn't have life. They didn't have it. Plants don't have a brain. They don't move around. They're fixed in a spot, right? And because they're planted by seeds and so forth. But here you have more intelligent life forms, moving life forms like animals or fish, I should say. Fish were moving, and birds. So there we have it. Let's move on. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. If you look at if you go and Google pictures of under the oceans are just teeming with life. All kinds of different varieties of fish, and you name it, some goofy looking ones, some scary looking ones, some ugly ones, and some very beautiful ones. God's got a very diverse population in his in the seas. It's fascinating. All right, moving on. Next verse. And God blessed them, they were even blessed, saying, as he actually commands them here, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. Now, one thing we can learn from this is God always wants life to multiply. Whereas, God is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. Whereas Satan brings death and destruction. In your life, you should think about this. We are always supposed to be producing, multiplying, not decaying and withering. I'm talking in the spiritual sense, if you would. Not decaying and withering, but always producing something. Being vibrant, full of life. When you look at the sea, it's full of life. There's movement. Now, in a spiritual sense and even in a physical sense, we're supposed to be like that as well. Never stop moving. Never get stagnant. I've heard some good Christians say that they're named the Benham brothers, a pair of twins. They go around and they do lots of good things spreading the gospel. But they say one of the things that they would say often was to be a river, not a pond. Because a pond or a swamp is stagnant. And it breeds disease and stench, and it's unlivable, for humans anyways. You can't drink the water, but a stream is like a river of life. It's clean, it's fresh, it smells good, it's cleansing. All right? So, there we have it. Moving on. Be a stream, not a pond. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. Okay, very short, 4 verses for that creation day, but a lot said there. There's one thing said there that most people miss. I missed it for a long time, and it is. I'm going to go back here to this verse, verse 21 of Genesis 1. It says, "And God created great whales." Did you know that word whales is a very poor translation? I love the King James Bible. It is one of the most literal word-for-word translations of the Bible. Unlike the NIV or other kinds of translations that really, they really take a lot of license in interpreting the Bible for you rather than letting you interpret the Bible by a more literal word-for-word translation. But anyways, the King James isn't perfect, though. They didn't do a good job with this word in this instance, because the word whales here is not limited to just whales. In fact, it might not even mean whales at all in this case. It probably includes them. But this, I'm going to show you what this word means here. This word whales in the Hebrew, it is the Hebrew word tanim. And its usage throughout the Bible, it's most often translated as dragon, serpent, sea monster, and more specifically, even dragon or dinosaur. Check that out, dragon or dinosaur? Sea or river monster, serpent or venomous snake. No whale mentioned there. So there's only a couple times, I think, where it's translated as whale. But here, doesn't that give you a whole new outlook on this verse? On the fifth day, God created dinosaurs in the ocean. Great big sea, what we would call sea monsters, or dragons. If you look at dinosaurs, most often they are, supposedly they had, they're lizards, great big lizards. Well, oftentimes a lot of lizards go into the water and out of the water and so forth. And so there are dinosaurs that were created in the water that can actually come out of the water. One of them being dragons. You know, the word dinosaur is actually a fairly new word in the last several hundred years. Before that, they were simply called dragons. You think about it, it's common sense when you look at pictures of dinosaurs and recreations of dinosaurs, how scientists and artists have kind of depicted them to be. They look like dragons. In fact, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we're going to find out that there was a fire-breathing dragon named Leviathan that was created on this day. And there's a whole chapter about him. But I'm going to make you wait for that for a little bit here, because I want to bring you on a little word study. You know, oftentimes people will use the Strong's Concordance or some other Hebrew dictionary to try to figure out the meaning of a word. But that'll get you somewhere. But the best way of really coming to a conclusion of what a word means is to trace that word. In this case, it's the word tanim, and find out how it's used in other places in the Bible. And then you can kind of start figuring out what that word is. You know, it's no different than, let's say you're a kid learning how to speak English. You hear words. You hear how they are used in sentences, and then you understand their meaning. Well, that's really the best way of learning the definition of a word, and not just relying solely upon the translators of Hebrew or Greek dictionaries. They're not perfect, by the way. They're really good, but they're not perfect. A lot of times people look up a word and they'll say, see, that's what it means. That's all it means. But then they don't do how do you think the Hebrew scholars figured out the definition of words? By finding those words and seeing how they were used in other writings or other verses in the Bible, and even other writings at that time. But anyways, well, we can do the same. All right, so tanim, that is the word that was translated as whale in Genesis 1, verse 21 or 22, whatever that was there. And it should have been translated as great big dragons. That would have been the best translation, would be dragons. All right. The Strong's definition here, tanim, says a marine or land monster, i.e. a serpent or a jackal. All right. But again, the definition is best defined by the context. So we're going to do that real quick. I'm going to actually bring you through a list of places where this word tanim that was translated as whale, where else it was. I'm going to bring you through a list where it was used in other places in the Bible and see how it was translated. In Exodus 7 verse 9, Moses' staff was said to become a serpent or a tanim. So there it was translated serpent. Same thing in Exodus 7:10 and 7:12. Deuteronomy 32 verse 33, it talks about the wine of the poison of dragons. So that word tanim was translated as dragons. Let's see here. Let's go to the next one. Nehemiah 2 verse 13. The word was translated as dragon. Job 7 verse 12. It actually was translated whale there. I think that might be the one and only other time. Job 30 verse 29. It was translated as dragons. Psalms 44 verse 19. That word tanim was translated as dragons. Psalm 74 verse 13. Talks about God breaking the heads of the dragons in the waters. It was translated as dragons there. Psalms 91 verse 13 says, thou shalt tread upon the lion and the adder, the young lion and the what? Dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Okay, and there's a lot said in that verse figuratively as well. Psalms 148, it was translated as dragons that live in the deeps, or the deeps of the ocean. Isaiah 13 verse 22, dragons again. Isaiah 13, I have that there again. Isaiah 27 verse 1. This is a good one. I'm going to read this whole verse. Isaiah 27 verse 1, it says, in that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan. We're going to talk about him in a minute. The piercing serpent, even Leviathan the crooked serpent. And he shall slay the dragon, that's Tanim, that is in the sea. So not only does God define this, Isaiah 27 verse 1 is actually probably the best definition of the word Tanim. And it's Tanim is the same, is mentioned as being the same as Leviathan, the same as a piercing serpent, and the same as a crooked serpent. It's a dragon. It's a dragon. Leviathan is the dragon, which was created on the fifth day. Now, again, don't get this mixed up. There is both a physical dragon, a physical Leviathan, a physical Tanim, and there's also the figurative one, the spiritual one. Okay, so we might be talking back and forth. In fact, Revelation chapter 13 talks about a sea monster coming out of the sea. Now, John literally saw one in the vision, but it was used figuratively of a political worldwide government controlled by Satan. But nevertheless, sea monsters were well known. Now, they might not have 7 heads and 10 horns like the one in Revelation 13 does. That might be embellishing it a little bit so that you could understand the symbolism. But nevertheless, people were familiar with great monsters in the sea, dinosaur-like monsters back in biblical times. All right. This Isaiah 27 verse 1 is very similar to Revelation chapter 12, where it says, it talks about the dragon and it calls him that old serpent called the devil and Satan. Well, this is used in much the same way when referring to Satan here. Isaiah 34 verse 13, and thorns shall come up in her palaces, nettles and brambles and the fortresses thereof, and it shall be as the habitation of dragons. All right, so there again, not whales, but dragons. Isaiah 35:17, dragons. Isaiah 43 verse 20, dragons. Isaiah 51 verse 9, dragon. Jeremiah 51 verse 37, dragons. Lamentations 4 verse 3, Tanims was translated as sea monsters. Sea monsters. Exodus 29 verse 3, dragon, great dragon, and so on. So there we can see that was most of the places. There was several others where the word was translated, but most often it's translated as sea monster or dragons, or even referred to as a serpent. But again, so what that gives us a lot bigger view of what God created on the fifth day. He created the fish and all the moving creatures in the sea, but he also created great dragons or sea monsters. And that alone would all of a sudden, that alone throws a big wrench in the idea that the earth is millions or billions of years old. Because when you start understanding that the dinosaurs lived with man in creation, some say that there might even be a few alive yet today. But that's another topic for another time. They lived with man. They were created even, some were created even, I believe, on the sixth day of creation. Behemoth, in Job chapter 40, God said Behemoth was created with man. All right? Probably created on the same day, the sixth day. But we're going to go into and find this Leviathan. Because Leviathan was one of the creatures we know from Isaiah chapter 27, I think it was. It was one of the Tanims. One of the great creatures that were created in the sea on the fifth day. And Job chapter 41 verse 1, check this out. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook? Or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put a hook in his nose, or bore through his jaw with a thorn? In other words, God's kind of, he's trying to get Job's attention here by saying, hey, can you stick a fish hook into the ocean and pull up Leviathan? No, he's kind of mocking here. What's a little fish hook compared to this great big dragon in the sea is nothing. So Job was obviously familiar with, and Job was after the flood of Noah. So dinosaurs still existed after the flood. And and there's a way to document that. Some of the people that lived during Job's time, the Sabaeans and some other things. We'll go into that another time. But God's telling Job, he said, you can't fish out Leviathan. So Job was familiar with what this Leviathan was. It wasn't like he was digging up dinosaur bones and putting them together and saying, oh yeah, that's what, no. Job was familiar with it. He had seen or had heard about these things, all right? You can't fish them out of the sea like you can a normal fish, right? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? Or wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? This is a funny one. Will you bind him for the maidens? In other words, are you going to be a big tough guy and capture this creature and show him to the ladies? Hey, look at how manly I am. I defeated this beast. God's saying, you're not even going to try that with Leviathan. You might try that with bears or lions or other big creatures. You're not going to do that with Leviathan. Okay? Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? You're talking big equipment here. You're not going to be able to use that on him, is what he's saying. Lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do no more. He's taunting Job. Yeah, go ahead. Lay your hand upon this guy. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down, even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? What God is telling Job, he's saying, when you even look at this creature, when a man sees this creature, he falls down in fear just at the sight of him. That's how big this thing was. It's not anything that exists today. Well, they could still exist today and we just haven't discovered them. In fact, there are millions of species of bugs that we haven't even discovered, haven't even classified. Just think of what could be in the ocean, even at great depths, or that are able to hide from us. Who knows? But God is saying here that no one is so mighty that they're going to try to stir up Leviathan. Okay, that shows you something. But then God goes on, he says, who then is able to stand before me? You know, men have the fear. Men had the fear of this Leviathan, this creature. But do men have the fear of God anymore? I tell you what, they should have the fear of God. You know, these thugs and criminals, they go about committing murders and all these types of things, rapes, and they think they're going to get away with it because they don't fear the consequences. But I tell you what, at that day, when they have to stand before God on Judgment Day, it's going to be scarier for them than if they were standing before a fire-breathing dragon. In other words, they're going to fall flat on their face in front of God and pass out and wet their pants. So you might as well start fearing God now instead of living a life of sin and rebellion and then have to face your Maker, because it's not going to be a fun day for those people. All right? And God wants people to know that. You better fear him who made Leviathan. Who hath prevented me that I should repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine, God says. I will not conceal his parts, nor his power, nor his comely proportion. And he's talking about this Leviathan. It's so powerful. Who can discover the face of his garment, or who can come to him with a double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about, describing the teeth of this dragon here. His scales are his pride, his armor. He's got armor on him. Natural, God-given armor. Shut up together as close as with a close seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. We're not talking about a small crocodile, like some commentators say. Ridiculous. All right? They are joined one to another. They stick together. They cannot be sundered. By his neesings, or by his sneezings, a light doth shine. And his eyelids are like the eyelids of the morning. In other words, when this creature sneezes, a light comes out of it, or sparks, or fire. And its eyes even are, it says it's like the morning there. It's talking about like the sunrise. They glow. Glowing, probably orangish, yellowish eyes. Okay? You thought these were a myth. But they were not. These were actual creatures that God created. And they may even exist today. I know that may surprise some, but anyways. Job 41 verse 19, it says, out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils go a smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. In other words, this thing's breathing fire. This is a fire-breathing dragon. All right. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. His neck remaineth strength, and sorrow is turned into joy before him. The flakes of his flesh are joined together, they are firm in themselves, they cannot be moved. His heart is as firm as stone, yea, as hard as a piece of nether millstone. When he raiseth up himself, the mighty are afraid. You'd think when even the most mighty men would be just totally terrified by this dragon. By reason of the breakings, they purify themselves. It probably means they wet their pants. The sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold the spear, the dart, nor the habergeon. None of these weapons of man can defeat this. He esteemeth iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. In other words, you go and try to get a big iron bar after him, or a big spear. He's just going to break this. He's going to just bend it and break it. Excuse me, I missed one. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned into stubble. Sling stones is like you throw big boulders at him. It's like pieces of sand hitting him. Darts are counted as stubble. He laugheth at the shaking of a spear. Sharp stones are under him. He spreadeth sharp pointed things upon the mire. You know, this could be like your Tyrannosaurus Rex. That could be what we're describing here. And the Tyrannosaurus Rex may have been able to breathe fire. Nevertheless, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was some form of dragon. All right. Sharp stones are under him. All right, here we go. We're moving on. Now check this out. He maketh the deep, or the ocean, to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He maketh the path to shine after him. One would think the deep to be horror. In other words, when he goes into the ocean, it boils. And he makes the water so hot. And there's actually a light trail behind him as he swims. Amazing. Upon the earth there is not his like, who is made without fear. Now check this out. Now God likens this creature to a spiritual being here as well. He beholdeth all things. He is a king over all the children of pride. So not only did this creature physically exist, this creature is likened, this big fire-breathing dragon is a symbol of Satan and his pride, his strength and his pride. I mean, Satan has that much strength, and none dare stir to without Jesus. You don't dare mess with Satan. He's a fearful being, just as this fearful sea monster, dragon, great serpent was. A dragon really is. It's just a great big serpent. All right. In fact, a dragon could be. It's kind of interesting because the dragon is, or the serpent is mentioned in the book of Genesis as a symbol of Satan, but before he tricked Adam and Eve, it was said that he probably had legs. Like that would be like a dragon, would be like a serpent with legs, and then he lost his legs and had to crawl on its belly. So do you see from Genesis, do you see the dragon being lowered down to just a serpent? I don't know. It's interesting. Speaking figuratively, of course, there. But anyways, so Leviathan, this whole chapter we read about this creature was created on the 5th day and was one of the great Tanims, as Isaiah chapter 27 documents, all right? It wasn't millions and billions of years ago. They existed with Job. They were created on the 5th day. Psalms 104 verse 25 says, "So is this great and wide sea, wherein all things creeping innumerable, both small and great beasts." There we go, the great beasts. This is referring back to the 5th day of creation. "There go the ships. There is that Leviathan, whom thou hast made to play therein." So Leviathan here was singled out as being this great king of the sea. And, there's actually I think there's a cartoon out. I'm trying to think of what it was. It was a kid's movie where they showed this woman that was the creature of the sea, and she became a great sea monster dragon of the sea. I can't remember what it was called, but anyways, was it called? Oh, well, I can't remember. You guys might remember. Some of you might know that. Okay, but so anyways, there's that, all that stuff is mentioned. It's fascinating. The word whales does a terrible misservice from the very beginning of what kind of creatures were created in that sea. Now, whales are definitely big, huge fish, but they don't seem to be fit in the category necessarily as these great fire-breathing dragons like Leviathan, all right? Dinosaur-like creatures. All right. Find something interesting. If you go to Revelation 21, verse 1, we see that on the 5th day, the creatures of the sea were created. But in the new heavens, it says here, I'll just read it here, Revelation 21, verse 1, it says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea." So when we get to the new heavens and the new earth, for some reason, I don't know if this is literal or not, but for some reason the sea is no longer there. Now, many people speculate that it's because the sea in Revelation chapter 20, it was actually one of the 3 places that held the dead. It was the sea, death, and hell held all the dead people that were delivered up to the great white throne judgment. So it was used in a negative sense there as being a place of the dead. The sea actually was used in Noah's flood. You think about it. When Noah's flood happened, it was a global flood that killed millions of people. So the sea was used in a negative sense there. But also, what came out of the sea? This great fire-breathing dragon, which is a symbol of Satan. The beast of Revelation chapter 13, that was symbolic of Satan's anti-Christian kingdom that rules over the earth, that is a great tyranny, that came out of the sea. So the sea does, later on in the Bible, after the fall of Adam, become kind of a negative place. But what's hard for a lot of people, and even for me, the ocean is it's beautiful. If you stand on a sands of the sea or on a beach and you look over the sea, I mean, it's very beautiful. So we wonder, why would God do away with a thing that has a part of his creation that has so much beauty? Well, all I can say is this, is that God wouldn't take it away if he wasn't going to give us something much better. There may be a good reason why there will be no more sea in the future, if it's speaking literally. And I'm not saying it is for sure or not. But the new heavens and the new earth, as mentioned, is not having a sea. That would mean no sea monsters, and no fish either, and things like that. I'm trying to think what else to mention about that. Well, anyways, that we could do a whole study on that at another time. But sea was definitely a big part of the initial creation and seems to have no relevance in the new heavens and the new earth. All right, hey, that's it. Fascinating. We're going to move on to day number 6 in our next study, and we got a lot of interesting things. I mean, we come to the pinnacle of God's creation, mankind, made in his very own image. That's what all 5 of these days of creation led up to, was the capstone, if you would, the creation of man. You don't want to miss that one. Don't miss any of these studies. Hey, if you want to help support us, we are working on building a new recording studio that will also be used as a local. It will also be used for a local Bible study group here in Minnesota that we're trying to grow. So if you'd like to help us out, you can go to our website at ChristianOvercomers.com and make a one-time or a recurring donation. There's also a link in the video description of this video. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can find it there as well. Anyways, God bless you. Stay in his word every single day so that you can be a Christian overcomer.